Section: Introduction. In this section, we discuss data contamination, which refers to unwanted data that affects the quality and validity of a dataset. In machine learning, this often happens when test data is used during the training of a large language model, LLM, meaning the model has already seen the correct answers for certain questions. Consequently, LLMs trained with this leaked data tend to overfit to the contaminated test set and perform poorly on other benchmarks that are not contaminated. We illustrate this issue with recent examples. We also show that data contamination can happen during inference, especially when LLMs have internet search access in AI products like deep research agents. Previously, these agents were evaluated using standard benchmarks, but since the correct answers are often available online, LLMs can easily retrieve both questions and answers from the web. We call this search time contamination, STC. As our first contribution, we demonstrate STC in search-based LLM agents using common benchmarks like Humanities Last Exam, HLE, Simple QA, and GPQA. We provide an example where an agent finds an answer directly from a Hugging Face repository, ignoring its own calculations. We evaluated 3 search-based agents and found that they retrieved related Hugging Face content with correct answers for about 3% of the questions in HLE. Our results show that the accuracy on contaminated samples is significantly higher than on uncontaminated ones. Our second contribution is a set of best practices for creating a transparent evaluation process for search-based agents. While searching and reasoning are crucial for these agents, many existing benchmarks can be solved with prior knowledge alone. We recommend focusing on benchmarks designed for information retrieval and current knowledge, like Browse Comp and Mind2 Web 2, rather than those aimed at general intelligence. We argue that search-based agents should prioritize tasks related to finding up-to-date information and conducting research. Additionally, we suggest implementing measures to prevent STC, such as source filtering, and encourage developers to report their mitigation strategies alongside performance results. With many queries targeting the same benchmark, even small leaks can quickly make benchmarks outdated. To support the auditing of our results, we are publicly releasing the complete logs from our experiments. In the background, we note that the knowledge used to train LLMs can become outdated, leading to incorrect responses. Allowing LLMs to access the web, such as through the Google Search API, helps reduce inaccuracies and improve response quality. Search-based agents often need to break down complex queries into smaller tasks before arriving at a final answer. To measure the capability of these agents, we initially used benchmarks designed for LLMs without internet access, as deep research benchmarks were not available. For instance, we evaluated the performance of agents on HLE, which includes 2,500 expert-curated questions across various domains. Notably, the best offline LLMs score only around 25%, while models with web search capabilities have achieved significantly higher scores. Section Summary. In this section, we discuss data contamination in machine learning, particularly highlighting how search time contamination, STC, can occur when LLMs access the internet during inference, leading to inflated performance on capability benchmarks due to retrieving answers directly from online sources. We also propose best practices for evaluating search-based agents, emphasizing the need for benchmarks that align with their primary functions of seeking up-to-date information and conducting research. Section: Test data contamination. In this section, we discuss test data contamination in machine learning. We keep a separate test set from the training data to assess how well our model performs on new inputs. When test data leaks into the training process, we call this data contamination, which undermines the reliability of our benchmarks. For instance, GSM1K shows evidence of such contamination across various model types. As our model pipelines can access online information while processing user queries, this leads to search time contamination, STC. This occurs when the retrieval step finds a source that includes the test question or a similar one along with its answer, allowing the model to copy instead of deducing or reasoning. There are 2 main reasons for this leakage. First, evaluation datasets are often hosted on public platforms like Hugging Face and GitHub. Second, popular datasets can be distributed through less obvious channels, such as personal blogs. We will provide examples of STC in our experiments. In our experiments, we highlight STC using public datasets from Hugging Face, a platform for machine learning research that hosts numerous models, datasets, and libraries. If a benchmark's test split is on Hugging Face, it can be found by large language model, LLM, agents. Even if datasets are restricted, any user with access can fork and re-upload them, making them public, whether intentionally or not. We will measure the prevalence of STC across several popular benchmarks and conduct ablation experiments to assess how Hugging Face datasets and newly published web pages after the dataset release contribute to overall agent performance. Our study will help us estimate the impact of search, Hugging Face, and other contamination sources compared to a baseline. To measure STC, we evaluate search-based LLM agents using their default settings and the same prompts as their offline versions on capability benchmarks. We primarily use Sonar Pro, Sonar Reasoning Pro, and Sonar Deep Research agents, as they offer comprehensive options like link blacklisting and whitelisting, which allow us to conduct detailed ablation studies. We also tested Claude, Gemini, and other agents with web search tools but found they rarely retrieved Hugging Face links, possibly due to limitations in their retrieval capabilities. With fewer search filters available in their public APIs, we couldn't perform as many ablation experiments as we did with Sonar models. We set the hyperparameters for our Sonar agents to a temperature of 0.2, top_P of 0.9, and a high search context size. The model output is capped at 32,000 tokens to ensure timely evaluations, and we allow 1 hour for API responses, retrying up to 5 times before marking a failure. We demonstrate STC on 3 capability benchmarks: Humanities Last Exam, HLE, Simple QA, and GPQA. For GPQA, we evaluate the entire set with 4 repetitions to reduce variance, following standard practices. We report pass at 1 accuracy and use specific judge implementations for evaluation. We log all retrieved sources and perform a contamination check based on substring matching. We consider a sample contaminated if any retrieved source is a Hugging Face copy of the benchmark item. Our results show that around 3.3% of HLE samples are contaminated across all agents, with consistent rates. Simple QA has the lowest contamination, under 1.2%, indicating it may be less prone to STC. GPQA shows more variability, with contamination rates ranging from 1.90% to 4.15%. These findings suggest that contamination rates depend on the dataset and the search and reasoning strategies of different agents. Section Summary. In this section, we discuss the issue of test data contamination in machine learning, highlighting how the leakage of test sets into training processes can compromise model evaluation. We present evidence of search time contamination, STC, from public datasets on platforms like Hugging Face, demonstrating varying contamination rates across different benchmarks and agents, which depend on dataset characteristics and search strategies. Section: STC Impact to Accuracies. In this section, we examine the impact of contamination on the accuracy of our agents. We notice in the execution logs for contaminated samples that the model sometimes prefers the ground truth label over its own calculations, as shown in our main figure. Additional examples in another figure illustrate that we identified datasets uploaded by third-party users, allowing agents to access both questions and answers. To assess the overall effect of this contamination, we calculate the accuracy of each agent on both contaminated and uncontaminated samples. The results for HLE are displayed in the main figure, while those for Simple QA and GPQA are in a separate figure. We note that the sizes of the contaminated and uncontaminated subsets differ, which we clarify in the plots. For HLE, we observe an accuracy difference of over 10% for Sonar Pro and 20% for Sonar Deep Research when comparing uncontaminated to contaminated samples. In Simple QA, Sonar Pro and Sonar Reasoning Pro achieve perfect accuracy on contaminated samples, while their accuracy drops to around 7% for uncontaminated samples. Sonar Deep Research shows minimal improvement, gaining only 1.3% from access to Hugging Face datasets. Interestingly, in GPQA, retrieving contaminated sources from Hugging Face does not enhance accuracy and may even reduce it. To validate our findings, we conducted an experiment blocking Hugging Face as a source to determine if the accuracy differences stem from dataset labels rather than other factors, like question difficulty. We found that blocking Hugging Face significantly lowered accuracy on the same subset of originally contaminated questions, confirming our hypothesis that Hugging Face contamination affects outcomes. This also highlighted the impact of contamination on deep research in GPQA, which was not evident in the aggregate data. We also performed ablation experiments using search filters to better understand how STC might influence evaluations of search-based agents. We recognize that STC can occur unintentionally and is hard to detect, especially when agents return a lot of web content. Hugging Face is not the only source for questions and answers. Many datasets come from online content, which may lead to unintentional STC during creation. To estimate STC's effect, we used API filters to modify specific source websites. We implemented several interventions. 1. Default. No changes, as described in our previous section. 2. No search. We restricted search domains to none, forcing the agent to rely solely on offline knowledge. 3. Blocked HF. We excluded Hugging Face domains from search results. 4. Only HF. We allowed only Hugging Face domains in search results. 5. Date cutoff. We limited search to 1 day before the benchmark's release date. By comparing default to no search, we can measure the contribution of retrieval and see how much performance remains without external evidence. Blocking Hugging Face helps us isolate the impact of a major source of benchmark artifacts, while only HF tests the upper limit of Hugging Face-driven leakage. The date cutoff helps us distinguish genuine prior knowledge from post-release duplication. Our results from these ablation experiments show that the default setting significantly outperforms no search on HLE and simple QA, indicating that retrieval is a key factor in accuracy for these tasks. The difference is especially notable for Sonar Deep Research, which sees its scores triple on HLE and more than double on simple QA with retrieval enabled. In contrast, GPQA remains stable across all conditions, suggesting that most GPQA questions can be solved effectively using the model's inherent capabilities without online resources. When we block Hugging Face, we see a modest reduction in performance for HLE and simple QA compared to the default setting, but these drops are smaller than the gaps between default and no search. This indicates that while Hugging Face contributes to performance gains, a significant amount of useful evidence and potential STC comes from non-Hugging Face sources, such as research papers and blogs. Section Summary. In this section, we analyze the impact of contaminated datasets on model accuracy, finding significant accuracy drops for certain agents when using contaminated samples compared to uncontaminated ones. We also conduct experiments to isolate the effects of specific sources, revealing that while Hugging Face contamination affects performance, a substantial amount of useful evidence comes from non-Hugging Face domains. Section. Time ablation, date cutoff. In this section, we explore the effects of applying a date filter on our results. We find that the scores from the date cutoff are significantly higher than those from no search and only HF, indicating that there is a lot of useful information available online before the benchmark release. However, when we compare these scores to the default setting, we see that they are generally lower on HLE and simple QA, especially for Sonar Deep Research on HLE. This suggests that if the date filter successfully indexes only the web pages published before the benchmark release, it shows that post-release content, like duplicates and commentary, plays a significant role in accuracy under the default search setting. On the other hand, for GPQA, the date filter has little effect, indicating that this dataset requires minimal online content to answer its questions. We also note that about 3% of our evaluation data is influenced by STC when assessing search-based agents. We quantify the accuracy drop when we address this contamination through methods like website blocking in further experiments. While 3% might seem minor, it can be crucial for high-stakes benchmarks like HLE, where even small differences can affect state-of-the-art claims. Our conclusion emphasizes trustworthiness over raw performance. STC can occur without proper safeguards, threatening the integrity of benchmarks and their longevity. Once an agent's search logs are shared, benchmark data can leak, leading to faster obsolescence, especially when many queries target the same benchmark. We also discuss how current capability benchmarks do not effectively evaluate search capabilities. These benchmarks often rely on human annotators who may use online tools to find answers, but the questions do not assess a model's ability to conduct web searches. There are three main reasons for this. First, modern LLMs are trained on vast datasets, often leading to new questions that test reasoning rather than search skills. Second, complex questions in recent benchmarks do not necessarily require the latest information. For instance, simple QA states that all questions can be answered with knowledge available before the end of 2023. Third, there are no metrics in current benchmarks to measure an LLM's search and retrieval capabilities. Therefore, relying solely on these benchmarks may not effectively enhance search-based LLM agents. We suggest that future research should focus on creating benchmarks with dynamic ground truth labels. To improve trustworthiness in search time evaluations, we acknowledge existing interventions but note their limited effectiveness against STC. For example, canary strings help detect contamination but only if all dataset distributors include them, which is often not the case. Dataset gating is already in place for benchmarks like HLE and GPQA, but capable agents might bypass these measures. Simple URL filtering is insufficient, as our analysis indicates other contamination sources. We recommend a multi-stage filtering approach to tackle contamination from various angles. To enhance trustworthiness and reduce STC in evaluating search-based agents, we propose several recommendations. First, we should implement multiple search filters to control source sites during searches, preventing STC proactively. Second, we recommend a multi-layered internal auditing system to detect STC incidents, including keyword filtering and substring matching to identify irrelevant content. Additionally, both LLM-based and human auditors should monitor agent activities for potential misuse of online information. Lastly, we advocate for transparency in reporting evaluation setups, including detailed documentation of filter implementations and STC auditing processes. For open-source agents, sharing complete trajectories can facilitate community-driven STC detection, while proprietary agents can provide trajectory abstracts to promote transparency and trustworthiness while maintaining security. Section Summary. In this section, we observe that applying a date filter reveals significant pre-release information online, impacting accuracy in certain benchmarks, while also highlighting that only about 3% of evaluation data is affected by search time contamination, STC, which can undermine benchmark integrity. We recommend implementing multiple search filters, internal auditing, and transparency in reporting to enhance trustworthiness and mitigate STC in evaluating search-based agents. Section: Limitations and Future Work. In this section, we present our work as an initial finding regarding search time contamination to highlight this important issue. A key limitation of our study is that our basic, hard-coded URL detector does not fully address the broader problem of search time contamination beyond the specific Hugging Face sources we identified. Therefore, a promising direction for future research is to utilize browser agents to examine all retrieved sources for deeper contamination. We are also interested in investigating whether models are aware they are being evaluated, if they might cheat during the evaluation, or if they are encouraged to cheat or not cheat, and how this might influence their ability to access contaminated sources. Lastly, we have already requested the removal or restriction of several third-party Hugging Face uploads to maintain the integrity of our benchmarks, which could affect the reproducibility of our findings in the future.